Pakistan is in the stranglehold of perhaps its worst nightmare, with its exchequer staring into the abyss of bankruptcy and unrest building up over the impending arrest of its former Prime Minister Imran Khan. Even as the country desperately struggles to stay afloat, there is theatre of the absurd on display involving Khan and charges of him having grabbed watches that he received as gifts as Prime Minister. To get a perspective on what the future holds for the country, Mayank Chhaya Reports spoke to Anwar Iqbal, one of Pakistan's most respected journalists and commentators, who is also the Dawn newspaper's long-standing Washington correspondent. Anwar Iqbal.
अनवर इकबाल, आपका इस्तकबाल है मयंक छाया रिपोर्ट्स पर। देख रहा हूँ पाकिस्तान
इस्तकबाल में मेरे भाई आप यहाँ असली फ्लावर्स के बजाय कॉलीफ्लावर से किया करें, कुछ फायदा हो।
ठीक है। अच्छा, मैं देख रहा हूँ और सुन रहा हूँ आजकल पाकिस्तान में बड़ा मायूसी का दौर चल रहा है और मुफलिसी बढ़ गई है, लोग एक दूसरे पे उतर आए मारने काटने के लिए। आपको क्या लग रहा है, क्या हो रहा है?
सर देखें, ये तो होना था एक दिन, इसलिए कि इफ यू लिव बियॉन्ड योर मीन्स फॉर सो लॉन्ग, तो एक दिन जो आपने फंसना था। हमारे साथ जो मेन प्रॉब्लम ये था कि हमने अपनी सारी पॉलिसी जो बनाई थी वो एक वन पॉइंट पे थी कि हमारी स्ट्रेटेजिक लोकेशन ऐसी है कि हमें हर वक्त कोई ना कोई सपोर्ट करता रहेगा। तो ये जो हमने सपोज किया था वो चलता रहा 50+ years, एक्चुअली more than 60 years. People always continue to support us, but then कि हमें ये बात समझ में आनी चाहिए थी कि एक वक्त ऐसा आता है जब वक्त जो है ना, टाइम आपसे आगे निकल जाता है। और हमारे साथ यही हुआ कि चेंजेस होंगी जो हमने सोचा नहीं था। मसलन जब ये अफगान वॉर शुरू हुई थी, तो आपको याद होगा कि हर पावर ने, इंक्लूडिंग यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स, सबने सपोज किया था कि सोवियत यूनियन टूटने नहीं लगा, होगा ये कि ये लंबी वॉर चलेगी। और इसलिए पाकिस्तान ने भी इजाज़त दी और इसलिए सऊदी अरब सारों ने अपने जितने दुनिया जहान के पागल एक्सट्रीमिस्ट थे वो पाकिस्तान और अफगानिस्तान भेज दिए कि ये तो 50-60 साल जंग चलेगी, उसमें लड़ लड़ के ये सोवियत यूनियन को भी वीकेंड करेंगे, खुद भी मर जाएंगे। तो हमारे तरफ दोनों तरफ से फायदा है, हम इनसे हमारी जान भी छूट जाएगी और सोवियत यूनियन भी वीकेंड होगा। टूटने का किसी ने नहीं सोचा था, वो टूट गया। अब जब वो टूटा तो आहिस्ता आहिस्ता पूरी जो है ना पाकिस्तान की जो पूरी इंपॉर्टेंट सीट वाज, इन अ वे इट वाज अ गेट टू द सोवियत एम्पायर। अफगानिस्तान वाज अ पार्ट ऑफ द सोवियत एम्पायर इन अ वे। तो वो खत्म हो गया स्टेटस आपका। जिसके खिलाफ पाकिस्तान लड़ा वही चीज पाकिस्तान के खिलाफ चली गई। और अब आपका अब मसला जो है, वेस्ट ने पंगा लिया है चाइना से। चाइना से पाकिस्तान लड़ना नहीं चाहता। अगर आप लड़ना नहीं चाहते तो जाहिर है अब स्ट्रेटेजिकली आप वेस्ट के लिए इंपॉर्टेंट इतने नहीं रहे जितने पहले थे, और अब आपको सपोर्ट नहीं मिल रही है। तो इस तरह तो आप पूरी नेशनल इकोनॉमी वन पॉइंट पे तो नहीं बिल्ड करते ना।
Right. To graduate to Imran Khan, I find it ironic that a cricket match has come to his rescue for a short while. I'm talking, of course, about the arrest operations being paused because there is a Punjab Super League tournament starting from March 19th.
I think that is how it should have been. After all, he played cricket all his life, and he's a respectable cricketer, isn't he? I mean, like everybody respects him as a cricketer. He was one of those who were not found involved in any scandals. They played well. He was respected, even in India, popular. I mean, I remember the days he was a big name in England. I was a student there, and how English women used to go crazy after him. So cricket is the game that brought him here, that ushered him into politics, and cricket should protect him. Why not?
It is the theater of the absurd being played in Pakistan because Khan has been accused of selling and or grabbing state gifts that he received as prime minister. Isn't that extraordinary? I mean, that's what it has come down to.
And look at the case. I mean, I'm not a Khan supporter, but look at it. I mean, he's probably the only one who paid according to what is required. I mean, it is not his fault that you require the buyer to pay less than half of the price. So he did pay as much as he was required to, and bought these two watches, I think, or three watches, whatever it was. It was not much. I mean, in 2008, uh, Nawaz Sharif purchased a Mercedes 2000, I think, for 6 lakh rupees, when you couldn't even buy what we used to call this Suzuki Dabba, which is called Maruti in India. Um,
Yeah,
Maruti was 8.5 lakh rupees in Pakistan, and he bought a Mercedes
Mercedes.
for 6 lakh rupees. So you can imagine. I mean, everybody has taken gifts from there and paying. Most of them did not even pay anything. Some did, most of them did not. But of course, they are not being pursued. You see, I think, I don't know whether it happens in India or not, but this happens a lot in Pakistan, which is this tradition of when you are in power, you register about 100 cases against your main opposition leader, or rather leaders, uh, all across the country, to keep him busy. I mean, or her in case of Benazir, and that leader would travel all across the country. One day he would be required to appear before a court in Karachi. The next day he would appear in a court in Islamabad. Then he would have to fly to Quetta. Then from Quetta to Peshawar, and that kept him busy most of the time. I mean, Zardari spent his
Right.
lifetime either in jail or in courts. So did Benazir. So did the others. I mean, Nawaz Sharif did have to do as much traveling because he was very rich, so he could afford all very expensive lawyers who always represented him. So in a way, he had this cushion. But this tradition should end. I mean, like you, this is how the judiciary loses its respect. You are using judiciary to make political gains. You should not. You should show some respect to the
Right.
judiciary. Of course, if something happened, do go to the court, get a case registered, but only if something happens, not for political
Yeah.
responsibility.
Where do you think this culture of almost knee-jerk vendetta that you just described,
Mm.
where does it come from? What is the context?
I think it comes from our colonial past. In the British did, that was the tradition. That's what the British authorities used to do against Indian leaders. But I think, fortunately, in India, you probably curb this practice. It still happens, but not as widely as it happened in Pakistan. In Pakistan, it multiplied.
Yeah. Yeah. No, in fact, in India, even now, it's not that prevalent. It's happening for sure, but it's not at the scale, nearly at the scale
No,
that's
no, not at all.
going on in Pakistan. Pakistan, it's almost a mandatory thing, it seems.
It is, as soon as, I mean, like Chaudhry Zahur who was the main opposition leader to Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, was arrested in Bhans Kachori case that he had stolen a buffalo. Uh,
I'm sorry. On the face of it, it is hilarious.
I mean, Imama Khan, Imran Khan's former wife. I mean, look at her background, and she did a lot of work in Pakistan charity, and she was introducing Pakistani garments, and particularly women's garments and uh, shoes, etc., in the international market. And she was doing a lot of work for Pakistan besides being Imran Khan's wife. But they they registered a case. Nawaz Sharif registered a case against her for stealing tiles from Taxila. She never did. She wouldn't steal anything like that. But they registered a case that she stole ties from Taxila and took them to England, which she had not. She said that those were tiles that she bought from the market. They were mm, made to look like the tiles found discovered in Taxila, but they had nothing to do with Taxila. They were built in the year she bought. They were made the year she bought them. Uh, but I mean, so much so that she actually had to leave the country. So I
Right.
mean, what else I mean, do you think Yemaima Khan would steal tiles? Do you think Zori Lai would steal a buffalo? I mean, what? There has to be an end to this absurdity.
You couldn't write it something like this. That if you wrote a novel that says this, people would think this is absurd, and it's actually happened there.
It does actually. It still does.
What happens when the arrest is reactivated? Do you think the cadres of his Tehrik-e-Insaf will again shield him?
I think that he will ultimately appear. All he is seeking is sort of the permission, sort of a guarantee from the Lahore High Court to appear before that court in Islamabad.
Hmm.
Okay, so I mean, he is seeking an assurance that he will not be arrested on his way to Islamabad. And the reason he fears arrest is not because he's scared of going to jail. What he is scared of, and rightly so, is that if he is in their custody, they will torture because I mean they want to settle score, so they will torture him. They may even slow poison him. That's what he thinks. I mean, if somebody is really scared like that, then it is also the state's duty to reassure him, to provide protection and everything, and that's not happening. And do you really want me to believe that a district and session judge, I mean, actually, an assistant district and session judge, who is the junior most in the judiciary, he is acting on his own, issuing non-bailable warrants of arrest against a former prime minister for that too in such a case. I mean, had he been accused of murder or something, that would have been different. But this is not a murder case. This is sort of that he is supposed to have taken gifts from the Tosha Khana that he was entitled to after paying what he paid. So,
Right.
I mean, I don't think that an assistant session judge would have the courage to do so without support from somebody.
So in that case, his insistence that this is a completely politically motivated hit on him, it seems to have some credibility, right?
Yes, obviously. I mean, the man is, I mean, he has a lot of flaws. I mean, he is not somebody who is known for sort of holding his tongue. Is not somebody who is careful. Is not somebody who is politically very savvy. But in this case, he's right.
Right. You made an interesting point earlier about the fact that Pakistan is not willing to take on China, unlike in the past when it was willing to take on the Soviet Union and sort of be a proxy or shoulder for the Americans. Now, with that being the case, and Pakistan practically bankrupt, as your own defense minister Khawaja Asif has said, what is the
Hmm.
way out? I mean, it seems Pakistan has never gone through this level of a nightmare on all fronts.
Reorientation of the national economy, changing your foreign policies, okay, focusing on, I mean, all foreign policies now are focused on building up the national economy, and that's what Pakistan should do. Try to expand your exports, reduce your imports, uh, encourage Pakistani businessmen, and there are plenty of them, to return to Pakistan and do business there as they used to do in the 60s and 70s. And before that, I mean, all the Gujarati states from Karachi have invested money everywhere except in Pakistan. I mean, there's this the rich Pakistani here, Shahid Khan. People spoke to him once at the embassy and asked him. He was doing a lot of charity work. He still does in Pakistan. And somebody asked him, "Sir, you do all this charity works in Pakistan. Why don't you invest?" He said, "Well, for investment, you need two things: security and profit, and we don't have that in Pakistan. But I do charity there because it is my country and I love it. But I don't think that anybody in this situation would go and invest in Pakistan. So we need to think, when even Pakistanis are reluctant to invest, who else will? So create an environment that would bring the money back to your country. And again, instead of putting all your eggs in one basket, which is the Chinese basket, try to balance it out, which I think they're trying to do now. So you have good relations with the United States as well as with China, sort of improve your ties with the Soviet Union, and above all, improve your ties with India. I mean, why not? I mean, I don't understand this obsession with India. I just do not.
Right. No, but I'm glad you mentioned India. In terms of the Indian response to what's going on in Pakistan, I see on social media there is a great deal of very gleeful Schadenfreude at what's going on in the country. A lot of people are actually exultant that
Mm,
this is what they deserve. Now, at the same time, there are those who believe that perhaps Prime Minister Modi can make a grand gesture and extend some line of credit as a good neighbor. I mean, there are different views. What do you think India can do at this stage to change the course a little bit with Pakistan?
First of all, I would say that the Indians should not rejoice. I mean, after all, we are neighbors. We may not have good relations, but when a neighbor is in trouble, if you can't help him, the least you can do is not to,
Right.
not to rejoice over it, not to celebrate somebody's troubles. Uh, but on the other hand, I also do not expect much from India, given the background that we have, given the state of our relations. But instead of expecting a big grand gesture from India, we should try to build the relationship slowly, gradually, and on solid grounds, rather than, I mean, this again, this attitude in Pakistan that somebody would come and rescue you. We need to get rid of that we need to realize that nobody's going to come and rescue us. We have to
Right.
work our way out. That's the
Yeah,
only.
in that context, where do you think Kashmir fits? Do you think if Pakistan were to agree not to focus almost single-mindedly on the issue and reach out to India, do you think things can turn around quickly?
Possibly, but I mean, those are the things that they need to be explored. Pakistan needs to explore, actually, not just explore, but rethink its Kashmir policy, and actually build build a policy that suits its present requirements.
Exactly. No, I'm glad you mentioned it because what's the point of having a practically bankrupt country which is this desperate, hanging on to an issue which is 75 years old? Why? I mean, a point will come at some point when a leader would emerge, perhaps in Islamabad, who would say that it's enough. Let's just move on with other things. Do you think there is a possibility like that?
I don't know whether any leader would say so, but the people are already saying it.
I see.
I think a vast majority of Pakistanis now want to forget the past and build a new relationship with India.
There is so much that can be done. I find it tragic that the two are not exploring it together. There is enormous amount of talent on both sides of the border, and yet we continue to do this.
For no reason. I mean, for God's sake, the partition happened in 1947, and it was very tragic. A lot of people got killed and everything. But now we should, I mean, accept the fact that what is done, and let's move on.
Right. How do you look at the Sharif government? How do you think it's performing?
I didn't expect much from them because, what is this government? It is a coalition of parties who never, who were actually enemies. I was going to say they never
Right.
agree on anything, but forget about agreeing on anything. They were enemies. I mean, PPP never had any love for PMLN. PMLN never
Right.
had any passion for PPP. ANP disliked both. Maulana Fazlur Rahman was against all of them. I mean, Baloch nationalist parties have their own agenda. I mean, all the entire coalition is. I mean, the way it was built was sort of they put together all political forces in Pakistan on one point that look, you're going to get into power, and
Right.
many of these parties knew that they cannot without this support from whoever put them together. So therefore, they just jumped at this opportunity, made a coalition, and formed a government. But when you form a government like this, of sort of putting together all these disgruntled political forces. I mean, how do you expect? How can you expect it to function?
So, when are the next elections due?
Nobody knows. That's the thing. I
Oh,
mean, it should be held.
okay,
It should be held at at the most by October. That is the requirement.
right.
But what the present government is saying, that there is, some people are saying that there is a provision in the constitution, that the Supreme Court can actually extend elections for 2 years if the country is in trouble, and the country is, so they are, yes, exploiting the economic
I see.
situation as well. So the country is economically has never been in so much trouble as it is now, and therefore the elections should be extended for 2 years.
Yeah,
I mean, that would be a disaster.
I see. But say, for the sake of argument, they do indeed hold them in October. How is that going to improve anything? Because you have Imran Khan battling a prison term, as it were, if that happens.
They were
Uh,
always thought that Imran Khan will simply, gradually, slowly disappear, but he did not. I mean, nobody, they thought that he will make some trouble. What they did not realize is this reaction is more against the present ruler, than for Imran Khan. I mean, this was something, I would say, the establishment's own narrative backfiring, because for 15 to 20 years they spent the entire energy on convincing the Pakistani people that these are, Nawaz Sharif and Zardari, are corrupt, Mr. 10%, and
right,
Zardari was called what? Iron Lord. God, I mean, Nawaz Sharif was all sorts of names given to them. There were stories fed to the media of their corruption, and so slowly people started believing them. And a time came that people were totally convinced that these are corrupt politician who should not be in power. And then suddenly one day the army decides to get rid of Imran Khan, which it does, and then it brings the politicians that were labeled as corrupt by the establishment itself. So people said, "Oh, hold on! I mean, what is happening?
yeah,
Why do you just take us for granted?" So this is a reaction against this attitude of taking them for granted. It's not so much for Imran Khan,
I
but
see.
more against putting together a coalition of those politicians who were labeled as corrupt by the establishment itself.
Yeah. In terms of electoral impact or balance, how do you compare the Pakistan Muslim League Nawaz and Pakistan People's Party? Are they equally balanced in terms of what they can do electorally, or there is a major difference?
PPP is finding it difficult to reroute itself in
I see.
Punjab, mainly because Punjab has changed. PPP is very good in rural politics, in the old feudal style politics, where you gather together all the zamindars and sort of, mm, instead of focusing on big cities, focus on a small town and rural constituencies, and win a majority from there and come into power. Now, those kinds of villages do not exist in Punjab anymore. Punjab has been a very rapidly urbanized and industrialized. I mean, you
Right.
travel from Peshawar, actually, so is Peshawar, from Peshawar all the way up to Rahim Yar Khan, which is where Sindh begins, and you can see this change. For the first time. All these traditional rural professions of, like, pot makers, carpenters, and all those things have disappeared. People do not buy pots from pot makers anymore, or furniture from the carpenter. They bring all these things from cities. Actually, those big shops in the cities have opened small branches in sort of small towns as well, and that's what people do. So many of them became jobless, and they moved to the cities. And so Punjab went through a major social and economic change, and PPP was not ready for this. It is still had these people with a feudal background who are no longer able to win from anywhere. So PPP is finding it very difficult to reroute itself in Punjab.
Yeah. To change gears a bit, communist China or sort of godless China has recently brokered a deal between the Sunni bastion Saudi Arabia and Shia bastion Iran. Do you think it has any role to play within Pakistan now that they are brokering deals everywhere?
Well, it can play a role in Pakistan, yes, but the problem is that nobody is sure what to do in Pakistan. I mean, Chinese do want to help, but they don't know how, because these Pakistani politicians, they may actually, you can bring them together and you can even make them pledge to do something. But everybody knows that as soon as the deal is signed, they will start violating it, because there is so much mistrust and dislike for each other that they cannot agree on anything.
I see. No, so it all sounds very depressing. I mean, it's almost like a dead end at this stage in terms of where it might go.
Yes, and they themselves have built this thing. The Pakistani politicians, they just cornered themselves. I mean, there is enough for everybody. That is a large enough country, and it is. I mean, it has only four provinces, and I mean, regional parties like say PPP is now gradually becoming a regional party. Has a majority in Sindh. Baloch parties have a majority in Balochistan. KP is with Imran Khan. Punjab is divided, so there is enough influence, enough support for each of these
Right,
parties, and all of them can actually take turns in ruling over the country, but they don't want to do that. They
right,
want everything for themselves and do not want to share anything with anybody else. I mean, why are they not holding these provincial elections? Although they're required to hold these elections within 90 days, they know that if they do, they will lose the elections, and then Imran will capture KP and Punjab,
right,
and then for he will hold it for like hold these two provinces for the next 5 years. So even if PMLN wins the federal elections, it will have actually no place to rule over except Islamabad.
right, right.
So, okay, so
Uh,
if that's what the people want,
yeah,
so be it. I mean, how can
yeah,
you stop it? I mean, you mm, took certain steps that made Imran Khan hugely popular, and now face the music. Those are your
indeed, indeed. And finally, to conclude, Anwar, where do you think what role? How do you see the emergence of someone like Bilawal in this context?
Bilawal is good and he has a future, but not now. I mean, he still needs, first of all, he needs to be what, 38 or something to be the
Yeah,
prime minister.
right.
He still has like 5 years to go. And in 5 years, I think he'll be ready to play his role, but not yet.
But you think he will be a force to reckon with?
I mean, if his party stays intact, I mean, PPP has a base in Sindh. It can rebuild its base in Punjab. It needs a new leader, and Bilawal can be the one. And he is educated. He is good. He has a future, but he should not rush through it. He
Yeah,
should just sort of focus on the spade work that he needs to do
yeah.
to be a good leader in the future.
I was quite taken aback by his rather unvarnished and assertive comments at the United Nations some time ago about Prime Minister Modi, because the Sharifs have been known to be little softer on that than Bilawal. How do you think they manage that balance? Because he is very outspoken when it comes to the Prime Minister personally.
But these days, all these leaders are focusing on domestic politics. So no matter what comments they make, those are intended to win over support in Pakistan. But when it actually comes to talk to India, I think Bilawal will be as soft as Sharif.
Okay. All right. On that note, Anwar, it's always a great pleasure to talk to you.